Welcome everyone. Today I have a special video to look at the strongest build for every class. Yes, in this video we'll go through the highest leaderboard of the strongest build for each of the class, including Spiritborn, Barbarian, and also Sorcerers, and also all the classes that is related. We'll be looking at the speed of those classes can clear PIT 150 or the highest PIT that is available. And as you can see behind me, there is a lot of videos and also tabs that is available from both the English and also Chinese community. And make sure you guys use the timestamps below so we can go through each of those builds and briefly demonstrate how those build performs and also what are the key pieces of gears for those builds. So coming over to the Diablo 4 Season 6 PIT leaderboard. This is coming from helltides.com, and you can see those are the current highest PIT clearing build for each of the class. Right away you can see Spiritborn is on tier 150 with less than 2 minutes. And compared to the other classes, Barbarian made it to 123, Sorcerers made it to 122, and there's 120 with Necromancer, 113 with Rogue, and also 110 with Druid. And I guess this does give us a brief understanding of the power and also performance for those classes in terms of Season 6 and their power to clear the endgame content. So coming over to the fastest PIT for Spiritborn. This is coming from Resistance on YouTube. So right away you can see this particular Spiritborn build is using the Mystic Circle, and in combination with all the mechanics and also barrier stacking for the Spiritborn. This Spiritborn build is very mobile and also deals a lot of damage, which will explode enemies with vulnerability. Now I'm sure most of us have seen this particular Spiritborn build and also type, and if you haven't, we do have multiple videos to cover the details of building the Spiritborn and also the recommended items and also the key passives and also paragon levels for this Spiritborn build. So over here, big thank you and also congrats to Resistance for clearing PIT 150 in less than 2 minutes with the Spiritborn. Now we do have the guides and also related gears. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the gears. I don't think there's any major changes, and you can see this video was posted around November 4th, and this is when everyone was clearing PIT 150 with Spiritborn in about 2 minutes time. So should you guys want to have a look at this in more details, we do have a video guide to cover this one. But of course, for those of you that haven't seen this one, it is one of the strongest and also fastest Spiritborn build for PIT 150. Now the second build we'll be looking at is a PIT 123 clear Barbarian build. And again, yes guys, we have covered this one last week, and this is when the Chinese content creator was clearing out 118 with a PIT. So here, thanks and also credits for 天罡大宗师, the Chinese content creator, for sharing his build. What you can see with this build is you are using weapon throw, and here he has incorporated additional ways of getting additional attack speed and also grouping enemies together. The Barbarians is triggering a lot of overpower hits, and what I do here is coming from the snapshot. Now you can see the Barbarian is somewhat very durable against the boss, and it doesn't have any special mechanics that explode the boss. So overall, for the majority of the fights, you're running around, you're grouping enemies together, and then you're basically overpower hitting and also taking them down quite moderately. I won't say it is the fastest kill, but this Barbarian is quite smooth in terms of grouping enemies together and then taking them down with your steel grabs and also with your weapon throw. So over here you can see a demonstration of this Barbarian build. Notice that he is always grasping and also pulling enemies together. This allows him to collect them together and then try to finish them off together once he have grouped a lot of them. There are a lot of mechanics and also tricks because Barbarians compared to the Spiritborn, they are not the strongest. And after his cooldown is ready and after he goes off at enemies, it does take him a little bit of time to take them down, but it is definitely more challenging and also I guess more interactive compared to the Spiritborn because you have to kind of play your way around the monsters to kill them quickly and also group them together. Now in terms of the boss fights, this particular weapon throws Barbarian is actually quite durable. What you're basically doing is you're staggering the boss, and then after you stagger the boss, you try to deal as much damage as you can, and you're going to repeat the process. One of the downsides for this Barbarian build against the boss is that it does take some time to take the boss down, and you can see that even though the boss is quite low in HP, it took him close to the end of his timer to take down the boss for PIT 123. But nevertheless guys, for the Barbarian class, it is still a very good achievement for clearing over PIT 120 using the Barbarian. Now briefly coming over to the updated builder's guide for this Barbarian. Over here we can see the content creator is using 5 different mythical unique items, with Hair of Perdition, with the Fourth Death, and also Ring of Stardust, the Grandfather, and also the Doombringer. And in terms of the gears and also choices, you can see some of the aspects are designed and also tailored for both offense and also for defense. Now, because we have covered this particular build and video in the past as well, I won't go through too much in this video, but I do recommend you guys to have a look at this previous video, which we had a look at this build in more details and also explain the mechanics and also the key aspects behind the build. So now coming over to the sources that clear PIT 122. And this is coming from Mekuna over here, who has been a specialty and also usually the #1 season sources in each of the season. So big thank you and also credits for Mekuna. So what you can see for the sources build is that it has the mechanics to blink around the map to trigger and also target enemies. And as he travels very fast to blink around the map, he can group enemies together with blink coming from the unique chest. And then as he perma-freezes enemies, he will be debuffing enemies with his Ruin Ward. And as he continuously set enemies on fire and also deal additional explosive damage, this build looks very mobile and very cool, right? So you can see that he is constantly blinking, he's constantly grouping enemies together and then stunning and also freezing them. So this particular Firebolt Sorceress is by far one of the fastest content clear build for the Sorceress for the high-end pit. And of course, similar to the other build, this particular Sorceress does have a little weakness against a single target. So you can see over here, he's taking down the champion monsters before he can take down the elites. And I guess this is a drawback for most of the classes because of the champion monsters. But regardless, you can see the power of the Sorceress. The ability to group enemies together and also exploding them with great mobility is a very good plus for this particular build. Now fast forwarding towards the boss. Similar to the Barbarian build, the Sorceress build does take a while to take down the boss, and this considered is a weakness with single target. So what you can see is we're looking at the boss rates 8 minutes to spare, and over here you can see it did take our Sorceress about 7+ minutes to bring the boss down, and this is when the boss summons. So this build does not enjoy the explosive damage like the Spiritborn. When the boss summons, you explode them with little minions. This build does have to do the hard work to take down the boss. But regardless, I do think this is a much more mobile build compared to the Barbarians, and even though it is 1 pit lower, I do give more points towards the Sorceress, should you guys want to try a high-end Sorceress build for this particular setup. So coming over to Mekuna's builder's guide. And you can see that over here, we're using Hair of Perdition and also the Ring of the Stardust as the mythical unique item. And in terms of the chest armor, we're using the unique chest which allows us to group enemies as we blink around. And here we're using the Tarasha loop which allows us to rotate different elements for the highest damage for the sources. We're also using the Shard of Vessel, which provides us with tons of benefit and also adding ranks to basic skill and dealing additional damage. Over here we do have the Flame Waver, which allows us to have additional damage coming from Firebolt and also through Firewalls and also higher pyromancy skills. In terms of the gears of choices, you can see most of the gears used over here have 2 greater FXs, and some of them do have 3 greater FXs. So if you guys are looking into a Sorceress build for the endgame with great mobility, I do recommend following this particular build from Mekuna. Now coming over to one of the strongest pit clearing build from the Necromancer with PIT 120. This is coming from秋葉-Akiha over here, and he has actually cleared PIT 120 much earlier compared to a lot of players. So this is back with October 27th, and I'm sure if he's still playing the Necromancer, he would have gotten much higher. So even after he cleared this, about 2 weeks ago, no one has beaten his record. So let's briefly have a look at this Necromancer build. What you are seeing is this is gonna be an exploding Bone Spear Necromancer. Together with abilities to group enemies together within the Bone Prison, he will then explode enemies as he groups them together with Bone Tendril and then curses them, debuff them, and then continuously to cast his Bone Spirit to explode enemy. Now you can't really see the numbers over here, but back then this was one of the strongest Necromancer builds simply because it explodes and also deals a lot of damage against the enemies. So as you can see, this Necromancer does have some pretty good mobility, and its ability to group monsters across the map is what makes this very powerful. As you can see, our player over here is going to aggro a lot of minions, and once he finds a good spot, I do believe he will stop and take them down. So you can see a train of monsters behind him and also in front of him. So as the Necromancer group enemies together and also trap them in the bone prison, he will be doing increasing damage and also restoring his resource. Resource will be one of the biggest factors for this Necromancer, and as you're gonna see over here, once he groups them like this, he can then continuously to cast his Bone Spirit, restoring all of the resource and then repeating the process. Together with much lower cooldowns on his Blood Mist, he is very survivable and he can continuously to group enemies together and then explode them down. Now during the time of the recording of this video, I do believe he didn't have the best gears, but nevertheless he did take down PIT 120. Now it does seem a little slower if you compare this with other builds, simply because this is a much earlier replay and the Necromancer still had a lot of room to improve. Now fast forwarding towards the boss for PIT 120. So this Breaker Necromancer build, very surprisingly, it actually does pretty well against a single target boss. So you can see we start the boss around 7 minutes and also 30 seconds mark, and you can see the Necromancer can continue stagger and also take down the boss very consistently. So compared to the Barbarian and also the Sorcerers, the Necromancer actually took down the PIT 120 boss within about 5 minutes time. So it does have stronger single target clear potential, and again it is very durable and also have a lot of crowd control. So now briefly coming over to the builder's guide for this Necromancer. We can see this Necromancer have 3 mythical unique items. The Hair of Petition is very popular among the other build that is not Spiritborn, simply because this gives core skills, critical chances, additional damage, and also this is a great item for single players because of the 60% damage multiplier. We're using the False Death together with the Ring of the Starless. This Necromancer build does use overpower hits, and because you're spending a lot of resource, the Banished Lord and also the Blood Moon allows you to do even higher overpower hits. And here we're gaining additional resource as we fire additional projectiles with Bone Prison, which allows us to recover essence. Now, similar to most of the endgame Necromancer build, this Necromancer will be sacrificing all of the minions to gain additional powers, using additional war cries to gain 15% damage benefit, and also increasing max life by 20% so he can do high overpower hits. Similar to the other builds, guys, I will be translating this Chinese build onto the mobilities guide for you guys, should you want to check the stats and also the special, tempering and also masterwork for this particular build. Now, during the time of the recording for this build, you can see the Chinese player have around 2 greater FXs to 3 greater FX gears. So should you guys want to try the endgame Necromancer build, I do recommend looking into those gears if you already have the mythical unique items. Now coming over for the Rogue for PIT 113. Over here we're learning from our friend Exodus on YouTube, and this is going to be a rapid fire Rogue build. So what you can see for this build is, it is shooting arrows at a very fast rate. And even though we don't get to see the additional damage numbers because it's turned off, you can see this rogue can also poison enemies very consistently. It has some pretty decent mobility, as you can see our rogue travels around the map with relatively fast movement speed, and the rogue is quite durable. So compared to the other builds, this is going to be a poison rogue build. And you can see our rogue variant is going to group enemies together, and followed by exploding them with pools of poison, and this actually drops a lot of blood potions, or health potions. So this has some really cool interesting mechanics should you guys want to try the build, because if you look at it, they continue to drop blood potions. Now in terms of the playing style for this rogue build, you can see that it is traveling across the map, grouping groups of enemies down together, taking down the damage reduction elite, and then permanently freezing and also stunning enemies as it drops grenades and also more blood orbs. So this is definitely a very interesting build. As I was looking at it, I was like, hey, there's a lot of blood orbs. We're going to have a look at the builder's guide after the demonstration to have a look at what is happening. And it is a fine build that if you want to play the rogue, it seems to be the strongest with survivability and also in terms of pushing for the pit. And you also have great mobility. Now fast forwarding towards the boss. Over here you can see we arrived at the boss around 7 minutes and also 20 seconds mark. Compared to the other classes of the build, the rogue does have a significantly great time against the boss. Maybe this is because the boss is only PIT 113, and maybe because the rogue does have a better staggering. So you can see our rogue friend is taking down the boss relatively fast. So again, this is likely gonna be one of the better single target build for the rogue. And meanwhile, during the fights, you're dropping pools of poison, and the boss's summoning minions is always exploding the blood orbs or the health orbs, which is a very fun mechanics. So notice here he was able to take down the boss in about 5 minutes time. In terms of single target damage, this build is definitely very good compared to the other classes that are not Spiritborn. So now briefly going through the item choices for this rogue build. Over here we're using the mythical item, the Fourth Death again, and yes, this is the popular item among most of the classes. And here we're also using the Ring of the Starless. We are using the Crow of the Nameless because of additional ranks to attack, and also additional chances to crowd control enemies. And over here we do have the unique bow with the Sky Hunter, together with the Containment, and also the Scoundrel's Kiss for the unique items that provide us with additional rapid fire. And going through the choices of the items, you can see some of the items do have 4 great effects, some of those have 2 great effects, and okay, actually most of them do have 4 great effects. I was gonna say some of them have 3 or 2 great effects, but this seems to be a pretty high-end rogue build if you look at the great effects. Even the amulet have 2 great effects over here. So should you guys want to follow the build, I'll have the links available to have a look at this rogue build for the highest pit clear. Now coming over to the final class, which is gonna be the Druid. Over here we're watching a PIT 110 Boulder Druid. So a big thanks and also credits for JMac over here for showcasing this particular Druid build. Now a lot of my friends love Druid and they have been waiting for a Druid build that can clear the endgame. So after stumbling upon this build, I promised them I'll make a video on this particular Druid. So what is highlight about this particular Druid build is that casting Boulder while Hurricane is activated allows you to continuously rotate your Boulder around you. So this is like a whirlwind Druid or whirlwind Barbarian that is kind of allowing you to petrify enemies, allowing you to have earthen bulwark, and also additional ways of controlling enemies. So this Druid, it feels like a cyclone Druid that works around and then stones enemy down to death with your rotating boulders. Now some of the highlight for this particular Druid build is that you can cast your spells and work around enemies. If you're looking at a much lower pit content, maybe pit 80 or pit 90, you can pretty much one-shot or two-shot enemies. And even with pit 110, you are basically spinning enemies non-stop around you, and it does have some interesting mechanics, even though the damage numbers might not be the highest. One of the downside of this build compared to the other build is that it does have a little harder time against the elite monsters that buff enemies with damage resistance. But nevertheless guys, once you get the build going and once you're petrifying enemies, you're basically stunning them non-stop and cycloning and also boulder rotating them to death. It is very satisfying to watch this particular build, and you have great AoE against most enemies. Should you find the right pack of monsters, and you're basically cycling them to death. So this build have its merits. It is one of the greatest AoE hands-free build for the Druid, simply because you don't have the target. You are spinning around across you and enemies are dying next to you, and especially for the lower pit content, most of the enemies will die within seconds. And even this pit 110, you can see the elites are dying pretty fast against this Druid. It is also very fun to watch though, as you stone them to death. Now fast forwarding towards the boss, you can see our Druid friend reached the boss within about 5 minutes and also 20 seconds. This build does have some decent single target damage, but again guys, it is possible that compared to the other classes, this is a pit 110 boss, so the boss will have less HP and also less scaling. Regardless, you're actually having a lot of crowd control to stagger the boss, and while the boss is staggered, you can then petrify them and also dealing tons of damage. The build doesn't have any problems in terms of survivability, and you can see that within about 3 minutes time, it was able to take down the pit 110 boss. What we can summarize is, compared to the Spiritborn, which is definitely broken, most of the other classes build will have a little bit struggle against the boss. And most of the other builds do have abilities and also utilities to stun, to storm, to freeze, and also to disable enemies. And in terms of the single target damage, a lot of the AoE build will have a bit of weakness. But in terms of animation and also skill casting, a lot of the other classes are still very fun to play. So coming over to the build planner for this Druid build. One of the core pieces of this build is coming from this unique amulet, which allows you to casting boulders and also hurricane together to allow the boulder spin around you to deal additional cyclone damage or rotational damage. This build is using the Shroud of Fourth Death again, and we're also using the Ring of the Starless. In terms of the helmet, we're actually using the Vesilis Prayer, which allows our earth skills to become werewolf bear skills and also fortify us. In terms of the other choices of gears, we're using the Hunter's Janeth, which provides us with additional skill ranks and also additional overpower damage. Now overall for this build, you can see JMac have most of the gears to 2 great FXs, and some of those gears are 1 great FXs, I believe. So you can see some of those gears are 1 FXs, great FXs, some of those gears are 2 great FXs. So it is not a heavy investment should you want to try this particular Druid build. And I'll be having all of those classes build available for you guys should you want to try a different class or a different build for this particular season. Now before we finish, I know it is not the best summary to just look at the strongest pit clearing build. So in the future, we're looking to some of the fastest speed clearing build and also some of the fun and also main build. For example, this is a small trailer. You can see this is a werewolf summoning druid that cleared pit 100. So here I'm going to fast forward a little bit to show you guys this particular werewolf druid as he mows down the boss with his werewolves. So in the future guys, I'll be making a series of videos to showcase you guys some of the more fun and also more creative builds coming from a variety of content creators. So over here you're seeing an AoE Scream White Barbarian that can pull entire map and also hit entire map with his unique abilities. So this is a teaser for the future videos. Now if you guys haven't subscribed, this is a really good time to do so, because not only will I be covering the latest builds for Diablo 4 and also new seasons and also PDR, I'll also be translating those best builds coming from the Chinese community and also making my own builds. Together I'll be covering the Path of Exile 2 to come, and very excited for this coming at December. So this is going to be my next project, to play Path of Exile and also to bring you guys the best builds for each of the class and also the best mechanics and also the best ways to play the early access for Path of Exile 2.